stuck in the lobby or jumping on here as quick anymore. So let's go ahead and get started. And well, good evening, everybody, and Happy New Year for those of us that had not had a chance to chat with since the end of the holidays there. Welcome to the Citizens Advisory Workgroup for MPART. And go through some quick housekeeping stuff here. And so as all of you know, you can go ahead and keep your camera on if you'd like, not required. If you could keep your mic muted unless you're talking, that helps minimize some of the background noise. And, if you are actually calling in and are on mute, Kelly, what is the magic code? What is it, *9 to unmute?
*6 from
*6. Thank you, Kelly. Appreciate that. All right. And a reminder that we are recording the meeting. And as you know, these recordings then get posted out on the web afterwards. And you don't hesitate to use the raise hand function and the chat function if you'd like to keep chiming in as we go, or just to put some placeholders in there as we move through the meeting. All right. So the agenda, we sent out a draft agenda on Friday, and I don't think we got any comments to change anything. So here it is, as well as part of the slide deck. Pretty full agenda tonight. And, we're going to try to still stick within our, 90-minute time frame. We'll do our best. All right. Well, let's jump into it and start right off with welcoming some new members. As we mentioned last time, there were several registrations we had received, and Charlie and Bob have joined, and we had mentioned them before, and Brad Venman as well has joined since the last meeting from Lansing. And I know Brad and Bob are on, and I know Charlie's on as well. Give you guys an opportunity to introduce yourselves if you like, and we'll start with Bob, if you'd like to say hello to the group.
Hi, this is Bob Delaney, and glad to be a part of this. Be interesting, and hopefully I'll learn a lot. So thanks.
Well, yeah, and welcome, Bob. You bring a lot of good background to the group, so we appreciate you joining. And Charlie, did you have a chance to join? I think I see you there.
Yeah, Steve, this is Charlie. Can you hear me?
Just barely.
No, sorry. I won't say much. It's good to be part of the group, and I look forward to getting informed about what all you're doing and hopefully eventually contribute.
All right. Well, welcome and thanks for joining. And Brad Venman. Brad, you're on mute. If you want to go ahead and introduce yourself to the group.
You bet. Sorry about that. Yes, thanks. I am looking forward to participating. I am pretty familiar with the Pfas as in general, and have been was a former DNR employee a long time ago, but I've been an environmental consultant since. So I recently retired and looking forward to keeping myself involved in some things I've been used to.
Well, thanks for joining, and congratulations on the retirement. We look forward to working with you here in this part of the group. Thanks, Brad. And last time as well, we had mentioned Dave was interested in becoming a member, and Dave actually lives out in Colorado, but has roots in Oscoda. And I don't know if Dave was able to join tonight, but we've made him kind of an unofficial member. So he's going to be CC'd on the meetings. And I think, as many of you saw, he should be a great resource going forward, given all of his background, both in the area with the Air Force and just from a technical perspective, too. Dave, were you able to join? All right. And also just to let you know, we've got a few registrations in process. They just came in, Stacy and Mary from the Holly area. We have a site up there, the Falk Road Landfill. And so we're looking forward to working with them. And Justin Talk, I think is how you say it. He's with the water treatment plant in Wyandotte. And so we just got his registration today, so we'll process those. And I'm trusting they will be members at the next meeting. All right. Thank you. And by the way, too, I think there's a few others that might be interested. I've just exchanged some emails with them. And so a lot of interest starting out the new year 2021. So that's kind of exciting. All right. So quick meeting recap from the prior meeting. Really good conversation there. And a lot of the stuff that we talked about ended up getting referred to our subcommittees. A lot of conversation on communications in communities and the getting a toolkit just as well to you guys and to MPART on how to address different types of communities' concerns and recognizing and respecting there's different needs within different communities. And as many of you might recall, there was a question that was put out there is, you know, are there different regions in the state with different perspectives on PFAS? So this will perhaps help us to recognize that and address those different individual concerns. And as well as we started talking about what we put on the web for the sites. And, you know, so that ended up getting to the website committee. And there's going to be some ongoing conversations there around what we put on the site or on the website and how we talk about areas where we've identified PFAS contamination. Since that time, some of our subcommittee folks have met with Abby Hendershot in our groundwater work group on how we designate sites and what we write up about them. And they're going to have both subcommittees will be meeting with her tomorrow to continue that discussion in prep for the February call with you all. And and I think I'll stop there just in appreciation of the time tonight. One thing I do want to bring up is we had been getting some help from some of you on writing the meeting summaries. And that's fallen on the wayside. And we wanted to check back with you and see a couple of things. Number one, if there's anybody that could give us some help on that. You know, we are putting the presentation slides and the recordings on the web. But I know it is a good idea to have, you know, some sort of a summary out there as well, so you don't have to watch the whole video, so to speak. And so we're looking for some volunteers if anybody's interested in helping us out on that. Even tonight, you know, just Kelly's running the slideshow and I'm trying to facilitate. It's difficult to do a couple of things at once. If anybody's willing to volunteer tonight to take some notes, and we can work with you then on cleaning them up. And then as well, going forward, you know, please let Kelly know. Doesn't have to be every meeting, but we can kind of share the wealth, share the pain, so to speak, kind of rotate it around. I think that would be helpful. Any thoughts on that right up front? Do you guys still want some meeting summaries, and anybody want to volunteer to do tonight? I'm not seeing hands raised, but I'm all right. Well, let's follow up. Anybody that would like us, you know, help us with the write-ups, just, you know, please let Kelly and I know, and we can see if we can try to get those back again. All right. Well, let's move on then. And so we're fortunate tonight to have Ann with us from our Water Resources Division. And this comes from a couple of conversations we had that Connie and Teresa initiated about what's going on in Southeast Michigan and all the different data and trying to put that in perspective. And so tonight, Ann's going to go through a presentation on the data that we've gathered from the Ecorse and Rouge River watersheds. And you get some feedback from you if you have any comments or questions. And then I think ultimately this could lead to a more public presentation sometime later this year, like maybe in end of February, for example. So anyway, I want to turn it over to Ann. And thank you very much, Ann, for joining us. I appreciate it. The floor is yours.
Hello, can everyone hear me?
Yep.
Okay, thanks. I'm just going to keep my camera off during the presentation, but I'll turn it on during the Q&A period. So thanks again. My name is Ann Tavalier. I'm one of 3 regional pretreatment program specialists in the emerging pollutant section within the Water Resources Division. Next slide. Here's what I'll be going over in my presentation. I'll quickly talk about the Wyandotte drinking water plant and then go into the work Eagle has done in investigating sources of PFAS in the Rouge and E-Course watersheds, followed by our next steps for 2021. So before I delve into the E-Course and Rouge River watersheds, I want to quickly talk about the Wyandotte Municipal Services drinking water plant, because it was a round of sample results from the plant that was the catalyst for our PFAS investigations into the E-Course and Rouge watersheds. As one of approximately 70 community water supplies in Michigan that utilize surface water as a source, the Wyandotte Municipal Services participated in monthly sampling for PFAS in raw and finished water in 2019. On August 27, 2019, the fifth of 6 monthly samples was collected. On August 8th, Eagle received the results of the August sample event, which had an abnormally high level of PFAS and PFHXS in both raw water and treated water, compared to those found in the previous 4 months. Shortly after receiving those results, weekly sampling began at the plant and was conducted for 6 weeks. The results were non-detect for all tested PFAS compounds for each weekly sample event. The plant began performing compliance monitoring for the 7 PFAS compounds with maximum contaminant levels, or MCLs, in 2019. For each watershed, I'm first going to be discussing surface water data. This slide shows the water quality criteria for PFAS and PFOA, which are currently the only PFAS that Eagle regulates when we are talking about surface water. The table shows the various criteria that we use to develop our water quality standard. The criteria on the right are protective of aquatic life. Those on the left are protective of humans eating fish. As you can see, criteria protecting humans are much more stringent than those protecting fish. Surface water criteria are so low due to the bioaccumulative nature of PFAS in fish. The Rouge River and its tributaries flow approximately 570 miles through Wayne, Washtenaw, and Oakland counties, and drains approximately 466 square miles of southeast Michigan. The Rouge River has 4 branches: main, upper, middle, and lower. Eagle first analyzed PFAS in surface water in 2001 when 21 streams, including the Rouge River, were sampled for PFAS and PFOA. The study found varying levels of PFAS and PFOA in the Rouge River. At that time, there were no water quality standards for these compounds in surface water. However, the concentrations measured in 2001 do not exceed the surface water quality standards for PFAS or PFOA that exist today. Surface water from the river near its confluence with the Detroit River was sampled for PFAS again in 2019 after the elevated detections at the Wyandotte drinking water plant in August of 2019. PFAS and PFOA concentrations in these surface water samples were below 3 parts per trillion. And for reference, concentrations of PFAS and PFOA less than 2 parts per trillion are considered background levels in surface water. In October of 2020, Eagle conducted a study to investigate potential sources of PFAS to the Rouge River watershed. 57 surface water samples were collected throughout the watershed. Sampling locations were selected to bracket potential sources of PFAS contamination in the Rouge River based upon historical and industrial land uses and in major tributaries near their confluence with the river. A detailed report from our surface water assessment section within Water Resources Division is expected in 2021. So 3 samples exceeded the surface water quality standard for PFAS. The Horner and Sines drain, both downstream of the Willow Run Airport, had a PFAS concentration of 429 parts per trillion and 84.8 parts per trillion, respectively. The McClough drain had a PFAS concentration of 14.5 parts per trillion. The PFAS site seen on the right-hand side map is U.S. Ecology Romulus, a hazardous waste facility. The groundwater at that site flows east toward the Troughton Drain, which is located immediately east of the site. The Willow Run Airport is a possible contributor to the elevated PFAS levels that we see here in the Horner and Sines drain, but additional source tracking efforts will be conducted in 2021 by Eagle staff in this area, as well as in the McClough drain, to identify potential sources. As part of routine monitoring, Eagle's Fish Contaminant Monitoring Program collected fish from the Rouge River in October of 2019. Fish were collected from the Rouge River downstream of the confluence with the lower Rouge River and from the Newburgh Lake impoundment of the middle branch of the Rouge River. These samples were processed as fillets and analyzed for PFAS as well as other contaminants. Here's a table of the results. While PFAS was detected in these fish, the current fish consumption advisories in place for this stretch of the river is due to PCBs and/or mercury. So anglers should visit the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services Eat Safe Fish Guides for fish consumption guidance. In 2021, Eagle plans to collect fish from all 3 branches of the Rouge to be analyzed for PFAS and other contaminants. Next, I'll go over the PFAS sites located within the Rouge watershed. So when talking about these sites, I'll be referring to groundwater monitoring wells and drinking water wells. And so I wanted to provide this slide as a reminder of the PFAS criteria for those samples. And the MPART site pages are currently being updated to reflect the new Part 201 criteria for the additional PFAS compounds. So here again is a picture of the Rouge watershed and the 4 PFAS sites located within the watershed. So number 1 is the Advanced Disposal Arbor Hills landfill. Number 2 is Franklin Village area. 3 is the Racer Eccles Road facility. And number 4 is the Rouge Manufacturing Complex. Oh, did I lose my slides?
Yeah, I can't see him here.
Well, we can see Dan.
Oh, there we go.
Yep, they're back now.
All right, thanks, Kelly. Okay. So the Advanced Disposal Arbor Hills landfill. So samples were collected from the Arbor Hills landfill in response to a letter from Eagle requesting PFAS sampling of groundwater at a subset of site monitoring wells, as well as a representative leachate sample. The purpose of the PFAS sampling was to provide information on the composition of groundwater and leachate at the site. One monitoring well result exceeded the Part 201 criteria for PFAS and PFOA at the time of 70 parts per trillion. Arbor Hills collected a confirmation groundwater sample from this monitoring well, and the result again exceeded the 70 parts per trillion for PFAS and PFOA. In February 2020, 7 residential wells were sampled along with 1 type 2 water supply. The results showed that none of the samples were above the 70 parts per trillion for PFAS or PFOA, or the proposed, at the time, the proposed MCL criteria. In April of 2020, additional groundwater, sediment, and surface water samples were collected to further define and characterize PFAS. Eagle received the results in October from Arbor Hills. 3 groundwater samples were collected from on-site monitoring wells. 1 well had a detection over the criteria. And so based on the initial investigation and really the lack of conclusive findings, Arbor Hills has submitted a work plan proposing additional sampling activities to help determine the source of PFAS. And they are planning to conduct these activities in the winter of 2021. So Eagle will continue to review the Arbor Hills PFAS investigation activities to define the potential source and extent of the PFAS contamination and to identify and evaluate potential receptors. Next is the Franklin Village area. The area consists of a former gas station, auto repair, dry cleaner, and the Franklin Fire Station. Since 2015, Eagle has conducted contamination investigations, which has included soil, groundwater, and vapor sampling in this area to determine if risks to human health and the environment remain from past use of various chemicals at the site. Historical blacksmithing, manufacturing, garbage dumping, fires, and potential use of AFFF are possible sources of PFAS. In February 2019, 4 samples were collected from monitoring wells and 3 samples from drinking water wells. All 7 samples were below the Part 201 criteria. In March of 2020, 15 additional samples were collected from various monitoring wells around the site. Only 1 monitoring well exceeded the 70 part per trillion criteria and the Eagle groundwater surface water interface criteria of 12 parts per trillion. In July, Eagle resampled that well along with 4 additional drinking water wells. The 4 drinking water wells were non-detect for all PFAS tested. The monitoring well with the exceedance in March was again above the 70 parts per trillion criteria, and it exceeded Eagle's current Part 201 drinking water protection criteria for 3 PFAS compounds. The PFAS source causing the monitoring well exceedance of criteria may be due to historic rinsing of firefighting foam from trucks at the Franklin Fire Department, or a fire that burned down the original firehouse around 1960. Moving forward, Eagle continues to work with the local health department and MDHHS on next steps. The Racer Eccles Road site is a former General Motors plant and historically manufactured coil springs and bumpers. Plating operations were conducted at the southwest corner of the site, while fire training activities were conducted at the southeast corner of the site. Groundwater contaminated with other chemicals has historically been collected in a French drain and treated on site before discharging to the Great Lakes Water Authority wastewater treatment plant. In 2004, the former plating area was surrounded by a barrier wall to help contain the spread of other contaminants. Groundwater contaminated with PFAS is primarily contained within the barrier wall. In May of 2020, a granular activated carbon treatment system was installed under the guidance of the Great Lakes Water Authority to treat for PFAS. The system is operated on an as-needed basis. In July of 2018, Eagle received some of the groundwater results from Racer. Results confirm groundwater contamination over 70 parts per trillion PFAS and PFOA in some samples. Additional monitoring wells were installed in 2019 as part of PFAS characterization activities. In December of 2019, Eagle received the proposed conceptual remedy plan to manage the groundwater impacted by PFAS in the southwest area of the property. The proposed long-term remedy includes the installation of a cap over the area to eliminate infiltration of the precipitation and eliminate the need to extract groundwater from the existing French drain. In May 2020, groundwater samples were collected from select temporary monitoring wells to evaluate conditions in the northern portions of the PFAS affected area. The US EPA and Eagle are awaiting results from these samples. Lastly is the Rouge Manufacturing Complex. The RMC is a jointly owned automobile and steel product manufacturing facility which has been in operation for nearly a century. This site is undergoing remedial investigation under a corrective action consent order issued by Eagle to Ford Motor Company and AK Steel Dearborn Works. Due to historic manufacturing and waste management activities at both properties, Eagle requested an initial investigation of the nature and extent of PFAS in groundwater and stormwater at both properties. It should be noted that the investigations at the Schaefer Road area and the main Rouge manufacturing complex are being conducted separately under the corrective action consent order. In June and July 2019, sampling was conducted of groundwater monitoring wells and stormwater at both the RMC and the Schaefer Road area. Of the 35 groundwater samples received, 7 samples were above the new Part 201 criteria for PFAS, and 18 samples were above the new Part 201 criteria for PFOA. Of the 15 surface water sample results received, 2 samples were above the water quality standard for PFAS, which is 12 parts per trillion. In 2020 and into 2021, the investigations on both properties are continuing. Currently, Ford and AK Steel are working to develop a corrective measures study to address potential off-site movement and discharge to the Rouge River. All right, on to the E-Course. So the E-Course River watershed drains 43 square miles of Wayne County and is a tributary to the Detroit River. The watershed is divided into 3 sub-watersheds. The main branch of the E-Course River is 17 miles long and is in the northern portion of the watershed. The LeBlanc Drain is an enclosed storm sewer and runs 9.6 miles and drains the central portion of the watershed. The south branch of the E-Course River, which includes the Sexton Kilfoyle Drain, extends 13 miles in the southern portion of the watershed. We currently do not have any fish data for the E-Course River, but Eagle plans to collect fish in 2021. So just a reminder that I'm going back to discussing surface water data. So we're comparing the results to these water quality standards. The river was first sampled for PFAS in November of 2019 near its confluence with the Detroit River after the Wyandotte Municipal Services drinking water plant had those 2 elevated detections I spoke about before in August of 2019. The map shows the results of the November sampling event. The PFAS concentrations in the E-Course River exceeded the surface water quality standard of 12 parts per trillion for PFAS. Because of the November 2019 sample results, Eagle added the watershed to its PFAS sampling strategy in 2020. The watershed, along with the Frankenpoet Drain watershed, was sampled for PFAS in August of 2020. 45 samples were collected. Several locations in both the E-Course River and the Frankenpoet Drain watersheds exceeded the PFAS surface water quality standard. The highest PFAS concentrations, 151 and 344 parts per trillion, were found in 2 drains coming off of the Detroit Metro Wayne County Airport property. Eagle sampled DTW's 2 surface water discharge outfalls for PFAS in April and May of 2019 as part of a routine compliance sampling inspection. Due to elevated PFAS concentrations in those samples, we required Detroit Metro to develop a PFAS source identification study plan to identify on-site PFAS sources. In addition, DTW was among the first round of municipal airport operators to receive grant funding to support monitoring and testing for PFAS contamination. Additional source tracking efforts will be conducted in 2021 by Eagle at select locations in the watershed where levels of PFAS exceeded the water quality standard. So next I'll go over the PFAS sites located within the E-course. So again, we're switching PFAS criteria. Here's a picture of the E-course watershed and the 3 PFAS sites located within the watershed. So BASF Northworks, Marathon Petroleum Company, and US Ecology Romulus. And again, these MPART sites are also being updated as we speak with the new Part 201 criteria. So I'm including the BASF Northworks Wyandotte PFAS site because it is physically located in the E-course watershed, but our toxicologist and Water Resources Division confirms that the PFAS at the site would not have any influence on the actual E-course river. So the BASF Northworks Wyandotte site is a chemical manufacturing facility. The facility is subject to a 1985 consent order with the state of Michigan to prevent contaminated groundwater from entering the Detroit River. The facility is also under a US EPA administrative order on consent under RCRA. 3 extraction well fields are operated continuously under the state and federal consent decrees to keep contaminated groundwater from reaching the Detroit River. The groundwater is treated on site and sent to the downriver wastewater treatment plant. In July of 2020, BASF and Eagle conducted sampling of the interior groundwater well fields. 6 samples were above the new Part 201 criteria for PFAS, and 5 samples were above the new Part 201 criteria for PFOA. In December 2020, Eagle requested BASF Northworks to conduct PFAS analysis of all groundwater, surface water interface perimeter wells. We are awaiting those results. I encourage you to visit the BASF Northworks Wyandotte MPART PFAS site page to learn more about the actions Eagle and BASF are taking in regards to the discharge to the Detroit River. In the summer of 2018, white foam was observed overflowing a manhole next to Schaefer Highway. This manhole is part of a combined sanitary and storm sewer system that leads to the Great Lakes Water Authority wastewater treatment plant. The drainage system serves a large, highly industrialized area. Through sampling and investigation, Marathon Petroleum Company was identified as a contributor to this drainage system and a source of PFAS contamination. In December of 2018, the Great Lakes Water Authority issued a violation notice to Marathon Petroleum, requiring them to provide data to characterize PFAS in the stormwater and provide plans for eliminating future discharges. In August of 2019, Eagle collected water samples from the drainage ditch traversing the northern property boundary, and as a result, have requested that Marathon conduct a PFAS investigation. In January of 2020, Marathon began conducting the first phase of the soil and groundwater investigation on and off site. And in December, Marathon submitted their feasibility study, which included a cost-benefit analysis and remedial alternatives. And based on those results from the study, remedial methods will be selected. So we're just starting those conversations. All right, next slide. So the US Ecology Romulus facility is a hazardous waste facility licensed under Part 111. Corrective action has been ongoing since 1980 to address historic contamination. Corrective measures have included an asphalt barrier wall and a clay barrier wall that reduce groundwater contamination from moving off-site, and a groundwater collection system that treats the groundwater before discharging to the Great Lakes Water Authority wastewater treatment plant for further treatment. Eagle requested sampling for PFAS in 2018 because a fire occurred at the facility in 2005 and AFFF was believed to have been used. In April of 2019, 1 monitoring well was sampled and the result was above the 70 parts per trillion criteria at the time. 3 surface water samples have been collected in the Troutman Drain to the east of the site. 2 upstream and 1 downstream samples were collected. Both upstream samples were higher than the downstream, possibly suggesting another contributing source. In October 2019, Eagle requested a work plan to improve the groundwater collection system on site to ensure PFAS contamination cannot move off site and will be collected and treated before discharge to the Great Lakes Water Authority. A final work plan was submitted to Eagle in August of 2020, and the work plan was implemented in December 2020. Monitoring will continue to ensure the improvements made to the groundwater collection system were effective. All right, wrapping up here. So these are our next steps that we plan to take in 2021 as part of our PFAS investigation in both watersheds. So we'll, like I had mentioned earlier, additional fish and surface water sampling will be done within the watersheds. We're going to continue to work with our known sources to reduce and eliminate, and conduct source investigation on potential sources as new information arises. And we'll catalog foam complaints to help inform future surface water sampling efforts. So last, here's just again the link to where you can find the watershed timelines for the E-Course and Rouge. And lastly, I have 2 slides for contact information. So the first slide is contact information for Eagle staff that are working on the PFAS investigation within the watershed. And then the next slide, these are the site leads for each of the PFAS sites that I discussed. So if you have more questions, please reach out to them directly. And I know I went way over time. I am sorry, Steve.
No, that was, you shared a lot of information.
I tried to talk as fast as I could.
Yeah, no, there's a lot there, and I really appreciate all the effort that went into putting all this together too. And let's take a couple minutes if anybody has, any feedback for us. I think that might be helpful too as we prepare to do this in a more public way at some point. And I see Connie has her hand raised.
Yeah, thank you very much. Anne, that was a good presentation. I would like to ask Eagle to please sample the Bell Drain and the Bingle Drain. They will be accepting the overflow from 2 closed, unlined landfills. So you really should be looking at that because that could be a big source of PFAS contamination.
So Connie, I heard you say Bell Drain, and what was the other one?
Bingle, Bingell,
Okay.
Bingle Drain. So try to get those 2 sampled for surface water. And again, one other quick question that always keeps kind of bothering me is you want to make sure that when the company has its consultant doing the sampling, at least one Eagle representative should be present to take a split sample, just to verify that what you're getting is in fact representative of what's in of the concentrations in the water. Also, I'm surprised that there isn't any sampling of leachate, especially from landfills. You should be sampling the leachate or asking the major 4 huge landfills we have in Wayne County to sample the leachate for PFAS constituents or contaminants.
So on those landfills, most of those landfills discharge to a wastewater treatment plant. And so those would be sampled by the wastewater treatment plant under the Industrial Pretreatment Program PFAS initiative. If the landfills do have a surface water discharge permit, Eagle does sample our permitted facilities on a regular basis as part of routine sampling, and PFAS would be included as part of the sampling.
Okay, well, in the Bingle Drain and in the Bell Drain, you are getting runoff from 2 detention ponds from the 2 closed landfills. And that's going directly into the drain.
Okay.
So you really should sample those. Eagle should.
Okay. I got them written down. That's
okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, other questions for Ann? Hey, great job. Really, really appreciate it, Ann. Oh, I see another hand popped up. Bill Creel.
Yeah, thank you, Ann. That was a nice presentation and good to see you.
Good to see you too, Bill.
Was there any sampling of the combined sewer overflows in either the Rouge or the E-course watersheds?
No, not at this time. I don't know. I'm not sure our plan for sampling them either.
Do you think you might request the sewer authority to do it?
It's a good question. I'll take that back to our public wastewater unit and see what they think, and we'll definitely talk about it within the emerging pollutant section as well.
Awesome. Thank you for that. And Sandy.
Yeah, that was very good, and that was a lot of information. Holy cannoli, man.
Yeah, I know.
My little sized brain to take in this late, but I'm just wondering, and I'm not from that area, so I'm asking this just as a novice, but are the communities that either live or fish or work in that area, are they aware of this? Has this information been shared with community members? And
so for the MPART PFAS sites, I think it's typically our MO to do public meetings. I'm not, Kelly, maybe you can help, or Steve, you can answer that part regarding the MPART PFAS sites. Now, the majority of residents living in this area are serviced by municipal drinking water. And so, you know, an email that just went out to the local units of government of these communities, letting them know about the watersheds timelines that are now posted to MPART. And as Steve alluded to, we may do some further public outreach in February.
yeah, I just think that would be important on a couple of ways. If the community members are on community water or municipal water that's not being affected, that's also important to tell people because it can be reassuring, but also to make sure people know the best way to interact with the surface water or fishing or whatever you've got going on there. I'm just stunned at how many sites and how much you've got going on in that area.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of heartbreaking, but thank you for showing all that.
Thanks.
Yeah, and before we get to Tony, yeah, real quick, you know, whenever we do have a site that, you know, rises to becoming an official MPART PFAS site, you know, we do first reach out to local officials, and if there's, you definitely do a town hall if there's any off-site residential wells that are part of an investigation. But as we know, down in Southeast Michigan area, we got a lot of legislative interest, so we've done town halls even in cases where, like Ann said, there's no residential well impacts. People are on municipal water, but there's still so much interest because of other potential issues in the area that we're doing town halls at those as well. And we'll continue to take you know, guidance from the local groups, including the municipal officials, on keeping everybody apprised. Tony.
Yeah, just a real quick question. To what extent or what's the status of fish sampling in the Detroit River? I know a lot of folks actually eat fish from the Detroit River.
So I would refer you to Brandon Armstrong, whose contact information is included. He's a toxicologist within our surface water assessment section, and he does our fish sampling in this area.
Thanks. If that's something we could get, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, it's on the last slides here.
Yeah, and actually we could, I think I've got something from Brandon on some of his proposed testing. Let me circle back on that too and see if we can just get you guys a follow-up on that one.
Thanks.
Yep.
Thanks, Steve.
Yep, you bet.
All of the contact information is included in the PDF of the slide deck that I emailed out earlier.
Perfect. And I see Teresa has her hand raised.
Yes, thank you. I have a couple of questions. I know they're going back a little But on the consent agreements for AK Steel and for Marathon, I missed the timeline for the consent agreements. Was there a timeline that was displayed?
So let me find those. Let me go back to my slide. I don't have the exact time of when the consent orders were issued. Joe Rogers is the site lead. And again, he's also included in the slide deck of the contact information. So he'd be the best person to reach out to about when those consent agreements were issued.
As far as they were issued, I know they have a timeline when they're supposed to be remediated, correct?
I'm not the correct person to ask about that.
All righty. Thank
Sorry.
you.
Other questions?
There's a question in the chat from Patty Baldwin.
Were there any residential drinking water wells found to have PFAS above the MCLs near Detroit Metro Airport or Willow Run? And no. I guess the question is whether or not any other investigations are needed around there and in any of those areas. And so never say never, but at this point in time, I don't believe we have anybody on any alternate water at this point. There's, again, a lot of service there is through municipal systems.
Right.
Okay. All right. Well, hey, thank you very much. And I really appreciate this and look forward to updates from you as time goes on. A lot of work going on there, we know. So much appreciated.
Thanks, Steve. Thanks, everybody.
All right. Well, let's move on next to something I know everybody else is interested in as well, is the demonstration from John Esch from Eagle. He's our GIS expert, and many of you know we've asked him to come in here and give us a demonstration on what he's been working on, along with AJ and some of the others here in Eagle, to try to figure out how to provide information to residential well owners who may never be part of an official MPART investigation, to help them decide whether or not there's potential risks of PFAS contamination in their community, and whether or not they may want to self-test themselves. And so John has started up working in Kalamazoo County. John, I'll let you go ahead and kind of walk the group through where we are so far. Pretty exciting what you've gotten done so far. So the floor is yours, sir. The only thing is I can't hear you if you're talking.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay.
And we can see your screen too.
Okay. So just to put some data in perspective, so I work as a geologist, do a lot of subsurface work. And I think it's really important to, when we're looking at all these 2D maps, to realize that there's really a third dimension component. So this is, really briefly, this is Gladwin County. This is a digital elevation model of the land surface topography. And we turn that off. This is the regional water table surface. And just to show you, often the water table surface kind of subtly mimics the land surface topography, but not always. But also it's important to show you in the subsurface, there's a lot going on, and the subsurface is inherently complex. So the yellow are wells screened in the glacial drift, and the purple are open hole wells in the bedrock. So you can see there's a crazy variety of well depths and screen intervals, just showing the complexity. And so when I show you this data for Kalamazoo County, you need to keep this in context. So here's a working version of the Michigan Potential PFAS web app. For some simple eye candy, this is a regional water table surface of the Lower Peninsula of Michigan. It's based on like 650,000 wells. It's pretty coarse. It's meant to be coarse. It's also showing our PFAS sites. I'm going to zoom in to the area in Southwest Michigan and turn off this one and turn on kind of a Southwest Michigan regional water table map. This is just zoomed in with more detail. You can see the Kalamazoo River here, the Paw Paw, the St. Joe River, just showing different levels of detail and the importance of the water table surface in doing this kind of analysis. And again, we can't turn all the mom and pops into geologists, but we can give it a shot. So again, here's the Kalamazoo River, Kalamazoo water table surface showing higher water table elevations. In red and blue are the lower water table elevations, and also the WellLogic water wells. I'll just show you some quick widgets. We've got a legend widget, a measure widget. This is a bookmark, so you can quickly zoom into Oscoda or Grayling or all the PFAS hotspots. I'm going to show you this screening tool in just a minute. Again, this is kind of an update of a presentation I gave back in November. You can change the background to aerial photo or topographic map. I'm going to show you this summary tool in just a minute. This is just a quick and dirty kind of a how-to. This is how to use the app. And if this ever does go live, we'd have much more detailed instructions and videos on how to use this. This is just kind of a working glossary, just as a start. A lot of folks using this aren't going to be familiar with a NPL site versus a TSDF site versus a 201 site. You can add your own data, and for time at the end, I'll show you how you can add your own data to this. There's a print function, a draw function, and also kind of a link function. So let's say, for instance, let me show you some of the data really quickly. So here's our 201 sites. This is a subset of our 201 sites. It's the bulk storage facilities, platers and polishers, refiners, Superfund NPL sites, EPA TRI sites, hazardous waste sites, and on and on. We can show you more and more. We have several more landfills, biosolid sites, POTWs, potentials, old landfills. But let's go to a specific location. Let's go to 1723 Huntington Avenue. Let me turn back on the water wells. So, as it turns out, this person's lucky because this landowner who does the search, there's actually a well, there's a WellLogic well. Here's some quick attributes where it's screened, it's 76 foot deep, where the static water level, the casing type. We can also do a hyperlink to the WellLogic record. So here's the official WellLogic record for that well. But in many cases, the data for their well may not be in WellLogic. It might be in the older scan records. It might be an old well. So we have this historical water well data set. These are wells drilled pre-2000. Click on here. So here's the hyperlink to those wells. You guys are probably familiar with seeing these. In this section, there's 69 water wells. So this is just a nice way to really quickly look at the data. You get a pretty good picture, see where the wells are screened, what the subsurface geology is. And in the end, all the stuff would be entered into WellLogic, but that's a slow process. So, a professional geologist, hydrogeologist, EQA working for Eagle or consulting company, they're going to be looking at all this data themselves. We already looked at this address, so they're likely to do the same process I am. Step by step. Where are the sources? Where are the receptors? What's the groundwater flow? Then we turn on the well protection areas. So in this area, there's the address. There's well protection areas all around it. So, but if you're normal mom and pop, they're not going to know what these terms are. They don't have time to look at all this detail. So we're going to take this exact same address and do a really quick screening search. So the whole idea behind this, and we can give very detailed instructions. We're going to do a 1 mile buffer around this area. So what this does is this captures all these potential sources and receptors in the vicinity of this address. So for instance, there's 3 201 sites in the vicinity. Let me turn those on. There's the 3 201 sites. There's the 3 well protection areas. So the whole idea is to give people a much simpler tool to get an idea what are the potential sources in the area. There's 9 hazardous waste generators in the area. So what we can do is we can get a quick summary of all this data in a kind of a canned report. So let me scroll down here. So this gives a quick overview of what's all in the vicinity, the number of wells, the number of well protection areas, the 201 sites. So this is just a nice, simple way for folks to get an idea of what's in their vicinity, fire stations. So hopefully that's useful. Another way to get to the exact same data, it's this information tool. So this is different in that it's not using this buffer, it's using anything within the screen. So for instance, if I click on 201 sites, this is a list of all the 201 sites that are showing up on the screen. I don't know if that's clear or not. If we look at the TRI sites, or the hazardous waste sites. So it's just another way to see the same data, but in a different fashion. Let's say you have your own data. Say you work for a county or consultant. You can add your own data. I'm going to browse to some data on my C drive. So it added this Superfund site, Plume, that I mapped 15, 20 years ago and worked in a Superfund program. So this happens to be a Superfund site, but also it's one of our PFAS sites. Here's the layer that I just added. So the value is people can add their own information, and do their own interpretation, their own analysis. So this is kind of an update of what we presented back in November. Does anybody have any questions?
Yeah, I see AJ and Connie. So AJ first.
Yeah, and thanks so much, John, and all the rest of the folks at Eagle that have been working on this. I know we first raised it as an issue, I think November 2019, and this has been the result of a lot of work, obviously with a lot of other things going on, and so really appreciate the continued focus on this. I mean, the thing that kind of pops to the forefront is usability. There's a lot of information here, and John, you and I have talked about this. I mean, it's one thing to see various colors representing depths to groundwater, but what we really need is, I think a lot of people have trouble visioning that, you have basically a hill of water underneath you and, water flows downhill. So, I mean, one of the things we had talked about is, not only having all these potential sources on here, but also allowing groundwater flow vectors to be drawn on here that might indicate, okay, this is near me, but, the water is generaling away from me or towards me. So there's a number of things that might make this a lot easier to interpret. Another thing is, people aren't going to know what Part 201 sites or TRI locations or, Superfund sites are, NPL sites. So what we were thinking about doing is possibly just having a general, all the potential PFAS sites around a particular location as entered into your search screen, with then arrows indicating whether or not that's coming to you or away from you, so that as a private well owner, without a whole lot of geology expertise or PFAS expertise, you can make your own informed decision as to whether or not you may want to have your water sampled. So those are all things that, you know, not news to John or some others on the call, but I just wanted folks to know that, you know, those all are considerations as this continues to develop. Basically, the core focus is to make it more usable and understandable by the general public.
Thanks for that, AJ.
The groundwater flow vectors, they're on the to-do list. I think as Steve pointed out a couple of days ago, is the important thing is if this ever did go live, we have to make it much more simple. We have to group much more of these layers on the right-hand side, but also give pretty extensive tutorials on how to use it. We also give them maybe a story map and also how to use the technology also.
All right, let's take another question here from Connie.
Yeah, just a quick question. I haven't seen this before. This is my first time. It's really interesting. Two quick questions. How up to date are the site data that you have up here? Is it for up to 2020 or does it go back to 2015? And the second question is brownfields. Do you list something that is specific for brownfields, or is that part of the Part 201 industrial contaminated sites that exceed the generic industrial cleanup criteria?
So all the PFAS sites in red, that's our latest list. I can't vouch as much for the EPA list. They have a variety of deadlines and timelines on when their data is published and updated. But EPA data is their most data downloadable from their website. As far as the 201 sites, the data was downloaded about 2 weeks ago. So it's up to date as the data I have available to me. It might vary. So for instance, like I said, the EPA data, it could be from last year, but it's the most publicly available up-to-date data.
John, you might also want to let people know that, you know, a lot of there's a lot of errors in locations of these wells, and that one of the biggest tasks you have in front of you is to verify the locations of wells, because you've found them to be sometimes a mile or two off, and that can really impact your maps adversely. So that's been one of the reasons why I've focused on just one county initially, right?
Right. So in a lot of ways, this is a good example, but also a bad example in that the Michigan Geological Survey is going through well by well, verifying the location, but also they're converting all those scanned water well logs that we showed earlier into a WellLogic format. So Kalamazoo County is clearly the best data that we have in the state. So in some ways, you know, we have a lot of sources in Kalamazoo County, but we also have the best data as far as WellLogic.
Yeah, good points. Let's move on, see if we can take another couple questions and wrap this item up here. Lynn. Lynn, you're still on mute. All right, while you work on that, let's see if we can get Bob Delaney.
Yeah. Hey, John. How much of this is already available? I know WellLogic isn't all that already available?
Yeah. So actually, most of the stuff's available. The only thing that's not publicly available that I know are these old dump sites. Okay. I'm pretty sure that isn't available yet. But everything else, well, the water table surfaces, they're not publicly available right now, but everything else is available. The issue is it's not all in one place, as you know, Bob.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering. And so what you're trying to do is get it all in one place and then make a simpler interface for people as well. But would you have the complex technical stuff behind it that we could get, like this stuff you presented here is great, you know, and I could tell which way groundwater was flowing and various things without the assist. But so will that be available to us also, or just a simplified version?
So I think Steve and others would have to have a little more discussion on, you know, a timeline for making this live, or I'm not sure if that decision's been made or not.
Okay.
Well, that's a good point. Good question, because that's one of the things we wanted some feedback from you all is, you know, is it for lack of a better term, the simplified version that would be the most expedient and most useful for residents to get to? And you know, the same information, you know, like you guys both have talked about is available. You know, would it be good for us to package that up in a similar way for somebody who might want to take a more sophisticated approach at it? So we're open to suggestions. John has to, you know, start working on the water level maps, and we're going to have to do these kind of one county at a time, and the data will improve as we move forward. But generally speaking, you know, we're looking for some feedback from you all on him continuing to move forward with this sort of an approach. And then should it be the simplified approach for the average resident? Should that be the focus at this point in time?
Well, I think, you know, this is Bob again, and what I see is that John's going to have all this sophisticated stuff behind the simplified version. The simplified version is just a sort of a summation of all this. And so as John's gathering it all in one place, or whatever he's doing, can he make that part available? And because I'm thinking, like, yeah, it would be helpful for the general public, but like some of us can, when we're working with communities, might be able to get in and get, you know, do a better, more analysis for them, show them more what's going on, so that if it's available to us as well, the deeper stuff, then you know, I think John's doing the work already, and so if it's available, making it available to us would be very helpful, I think, for communities.
Okay, well, good feedback. Thank you for that.
Steve, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Okay, great. I got used to another office setup here, and now I'm getting used to this one. I did want to concur. I think this is an excellent idea. I live in the Rockford area, and aside from the fact that this points out concerning areas where people might want to know, it is very hard for the public to understand the idea of a plume coming from a contaminated site, and it's particularly with PFAS that you can't smell it, taste it, or well, you can't hear it either, but you can't see it, and so it's easy to think there's no problem. Even in Rockford area myself, I was just reminded that one of the schools right in a little community has for PFAS, but nothing's happening about what's the source and what about nearby properties. And I always think about people in the community. What if I lived next to one of these areas and I was simply busy with young children at home and I didn't have time to educate myself? And to have something simple and even within the school system, let's say, that they could. I'm also of a Clean Water Ambassador program. One of my burdens, and I think this is so helpful, is we need to educate people on private wells. So many are oblivious. And any way we can do that is great. And so I don't know all the details that need to be.
I think we lost you, Lynn. All right, well, until Lynn gets back, let's move on to Daniel Brown.
Yeah, so just to answer your question, I think it's certainly worth, you know, keep pursuing, you know, the complex version or, sort of the full version with the data getting out there. I think that could be informative to a lot of the people with the capacity to, learn from this, use it for their own areas. In our watershed, here on River Watershed, we have, retired USGS folks, retired Eagle folks, several private consultants that have approached us looking for similar types of information. We haven't, been able to really point them in the right direction. So for talking about PFAS risks, but then also talking about any number of other things that would be useful just coming out of having all of the data in one spot, I think is really potentially beneficial. I struggle, so I consider myself a total novice beginner GIS person. So, I can get into Esri and pull layers together and do simple actions. But even for me with that, level of knowledge, I'm struggling to see how there's so much information here that requires so much nuance without distilling it down to something that I think that looks quite a bit different. I'm not sure what that looks like. I think there are really important messages to tell about risk and proximity and groundwater flow and gradients and all that. I'm not sure how to present that from what's here in a way that is easily communicable without really spending a lot of time just on that communication piece. I think that process of really distilling it down to something publicly accessible, that's sort of an entire PhD and career in waiting, I think. But certainly it's worth keep pursuing, getting the data together. And I'm a big fan of pulling data together in ways that allow other people to do things. And I think this is certainly a case where, there are some ways where we know just having everything ready to be used is helpful, and there will be lots of other ways that it will be useful that we haven't thought of yet. So certainly think that's a good idea.
Awesome. Well, thanks for the feedback there. And Lynn, I see you there.
Yeah. Am I back on? Can you hear me again? Okay, I guess I find more than enough ways to. Okay, I agree with the last comment. I think that was Dan. Having a bit of an educational background as well, we've got to have different layers of communicating. We need the most simple, basic, how is a plume different than, what is groundwater? And like some places to start at the very basics to begin to educate people. And I think that including people with skills of education and of communication could help in this matter. And again, I know that the Clean Water Ambassador program is already planning to address some of these things, about to communicate. And I don't know if they're connected with MPART, but anyway, that we can pull resources together and cover the basics first, just as when you're learning the basics of anything. Other people can detail it out more, and I'm going to stop because I'm going around in circles. But thank you for the work you're doing.
Yeah, no, hey, thank you very much. And I think we probably should wrap this agenda item out. And but thank John for all his good work on this.
Yeah,
and
thank
John,
you.
I think you heard enough, John, that this is something folks want to continue with. And it sounds like from some of the comments that we almost might want to look at this as there's kind of a 101, a 201, and a 301 version somewhere along the way. So thanks very much for tonight's presentation and everybody for the feedback. I know we're running behind on schedule here a little bit, but let's give Mike Jury a few minutes to talk a little bit more about the surface water foam study results. Go ahead, Mike.
Thank you, Steve. The long anticipated foam study that was done by AECOM for surface water foam, we hope will be released tomorrow sometime. It's being fixed. One last item we found, a little glitch in the report, so we're getting that fixed up tonight. So the hope is that it will be out public tomorrow. So just a real quick overview, surface water foams, fortunately, most of this group has a pretty good idea about surface water foams. They can be natural or of human origin. They're globally widespread. You may have seen recently these big storms in Australia kicked up huge piles of foam, 6 foot deep. My favorite one is where a dog runs into it and they're calling the dog, and every so often you see the dog jump up with its head above the foam. So it can form in the sea, being marine, brackish, freshwater. Compositionally, it's got air, it's got gases, there's water, there's minerals. It's kind of like Prego, you know, everything is in there. So it's bacteria, viruses, synthetic chemicals, surfactants. So a lot of different things are in the foam. So why did we do it? One was we wanted to find out if there was a cost-effective way to sample surface water foams. We were doing it with our hands, gloved hands. And so we wondered if there wasn't a better way. And then once we had a better way was to refine that sampling protocol. We wanted to look at the behavior and PFAS concentrations in the surface water foam, and then of course with the surface water that it came from. And lastly, there were other things, but lastly, look at conceptual models. How does surface water foam transport in surface waters? Next, please. So how did we do this? So one of the things we found out really quickly, that if you're sampling along a river, it's not always safe. So we looked at dams. For the folks that are on from Rockford, we did take samples by the Rockford Dam, and you know that's not exactly the world's safest place with the rocks and slippery items. So we came up with the idea of using a pool skimmer, and we came up with a way, we meaning AECOM came up with a way to modify that, and so you could safely sample standing away from the shoreline. And then we put that into 2-gallon bags, Ziploc bags. You refrigerate it, you allow it to condense, you pour it through cheesecloth, which we did sample to make sure that it did not have PFAS in it. And you strain out the big chunks, and then you end up with a container that went off for genetic analysis, meaning looking for viruses and bacteria, and then the other went off to Vista Labs for analysis. So next, please. So what were the key points? The report is 400 some pages. Don't let that discourage you. Many hundreds of those pages are the raw analytical data from Vista Labs. So it's not that big of a report. So please don't let that scare you off. So the key points we found were that the handheld dipper, the pool skimmer method, is the safest and probably the best method, although you can do it with your hands. The PFAS profiles that came out of the foam suggest, and this is pretty what you would expect, that there's a site-specific nature for the surface water foam chemical composition. But as this is the first scientific study that's been done, we figured that would be the case, but you never know. So you have to go out and figure it out and make sure what the truth of it is. PFAS concentrations detected in the foam and surface water indicates there's an enrichment process that happens during the development of the foam. We all pretty much figured that was true too, but we were able to show, yes, indeed, that does happen. Next, Kelly. On inland lakes, the foam does accumulate downwind, and along the shorelines, wind speed and wind direction have been identified as driving factors for foam transport. We also found that weather conditions may make a difference, but we need to do a little more work on that to figure that out. And that's not something that you wouldn't figure would happen. Wind blows foam onshore, along the shore. In rivers, it's largely driven by the movement of water downstream. And the surface water foam is difficult to predict, and persistence in many cases is short and measured in terms of hours. Some foams tend to last longer, and that's probably based on what it's being formed from. But most of the ones, when we would get a call, by the time we got there, it was already gone. Or it could have moved on either by surface water moving it or currents. Next one, please. So hopefully I can take some questions. And Steve, I did my best to catch you up.
You did awesome there, Mike. Is there Any quick questions for Mike? Like he mentioned, it'll be available, hopefully posted tomorrow, and encourage you to take a look at it. I see a hand from Connie.
Yeah, quickly. Just want to know, did you check and see if the pool net and the plastic bags that you're putting the foam in were free and clear of PFAS constituents?
Yes, so the pool skimmer, we used the handle and the frame from that, which is metal. We didn't use plastic, we used metal. The nylon net that you're thinking of, we did not use. We used cheesecloth that we got from Ace Hardware, and we did do an equipment blank on that material. So yes, we did check that out and make sure that that did not have PFAS in it or could contaminate our sample. And the same with the Ziploc bags. We used the same brand of Ziploc bags, and we did use equipment blanks on those also. Good point, because that is an important point, and that was done, Connie.
Okay, thanks.
All right. Here's another hand. Tony.
Yeah, Mike, thank you. Thank you for the update. And I just wondered the extent to which you have seen or utilized the study that was done by a group of scientists, including Courtney Kerrigan and Jennifer Field. I know they did a lot of work up in Escoda.
It hasn't been published yet, so I wasn't able to use what I don't know. So I don't know which. Are you talking about the surface microlayer sampling, or which one are you talking about?
I'm talking about the foam study. They actually offered to present it at the Eagle Summit meeting here in late October, and were turned down. So it sounds like there's been a sort of the communication has gone haywire there.
Yeah, I'm not aware of it, but I'd love to see it and find out if their findings are consistent with what we found. And of course, our study looked at the Rogue River going through Rockford, looked at the Huron River, looked at Lake Marguerite, Van Etten Lake. I'm missing the Thornapple River, and also Cedar Lake was sampled. So those were 6 sites that were looked at statewide when we did this. Half the problem we had was that was luck of the draw. We would send staff out to go look and get a foam sample, and many times we'd get to the location and there wasn't foam for us to sample. So it was difficult at times.
All right, thanks for that. And final question, Dave.
Yeah, Mike, the question I have is that report, is that going to be on the MPART website?
Yes.
Okay.
There'll be a link, and you'll be able to download it and look at it at your leisure.
Very good. Thank you very much.
Right. Tony, did your hand pop up again?
Yeah, I had just one more question. Mike, what are the next steps from here, from Eagle's standpoint with regard to the foam? I know there's been sort of I would call it a half-hearted effort by sort of slipping a little thing on the 3rd paragraph of a press release telling people around the state that if, keep an eye out for this stuff, but I don't think anybody really paid much attention to it. What's happening next?
What would be happening next is that we will have people look at the report and get a feel for the findings we had. And if there's funding available to do a second study, and there is a requirement from MPART to do that, then we'll move forward with designing another study to do the sampling. So that's not a very good answer, Tony, but that's the answer I have at the moment.
Yeah. Mike, as always, I appreciate it, Mike.
Yeah, you're welcome. And I should point out that this was the first of its kind probably in the world. So was it the world's best study? Well, yeah, it is the world's best study because it's the only one that's out there other than this other one by Dr. Field. But, we'll learn. And if we're go ahead with a second study, we'll certainly do more based on what we're able to find. There's a lot of stuff in the report. I just don't have a whole lot of time to go over it. There's a lot of fascinating things. And so whether you're a citizen or a science geek, it has a little bit for everybody in there.
Hey, Mike, let's squeeze in two other questions real quick here. We've got Lynn.
Yeah, just it may be in the report, Mike, but again, one of my concerns is as with parents who might have children swimming in areas like I've noticed at Portage Lake in Onekama, just like you said, the foam collects frequently at one end of the lake and collects. So after it's gone down, does it absorb into the sand? What's the impact of foam going frequently towards one area in the lake? And is that safe for swimming? I don't know the answer, but it's one
Right.
thing I am concerned about.
Well, I'll answer the first part of your question is that when the foam dissipates, it turns back into a liquid. That liquid will go back into the water if the foam is on the surface of the water. If it's on the shoreline, it will go back into the sand, and probably as the waves come back, it'll end up back in the water.
Okay.
The other part of your question about safety is that MDHHS certainly has put out a statewide advisory that last summer recommending that people not contact with foam, and also that if you are exposed to it, you should wash yourself off from foam. And maybe we can get somebody at one of our next meetings to talk about that. We're in January, it's only a few months, and then people will be recreating in Michigan on surface waters again. So it may be a good idea to have somebody from DHHS. Maybe we can get Bill Farrell to come talk about foam again.
That would be great because a lot of children play in shallow areas, right? The smallest of children do.
Well,
So.
I was a small child once and I did it myself. I made foam beards and all kinds of things. So that explains everything you ever want to know about me. Yeah,
I thought it was something, Mike. I did.
Yeah,
And
I licked my fingers too after I had it in the foam. So yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Mike.
All right. And lastly, Arnie.
Thank you, Steve. Mike, great work. And I know you've been working hard at this in this study and in this report. To follow up on what Tony mentioned, that part of the Jennifer Fields University of Oregon study around multiple sites around the state, part of it was published November 8th, and it's available. And it was presented partially during, but not by the study that Tony mentioned by Courtney Kerrigan. That was not accepted for that state seminar. But my question is, studies are very expensive. Is there any chance that you can pool some money together to at least combine or review your study and the Jennifer Fields study once it's published in the next month or two, which I've heard is possible in spring, to combine the understandings and maybe some of the outcomes of those two studies and start working on that now?
Well, certainly I would love to look at the work that they've done, see what their results compare to ours. The hope would be that they're very similar or that they have some symbiotic nature that we would be able to look at that. So yes, as soon as I get a hold of those, I will look at those and take a look and try to see what that points us towards. One of the things that it does point us towards is looking at the surface microlayer, because that seems to be part of the whole foam making deal. And I would love to see what Dr. Field comes up with that, and that will help us. So yeah, Arnie, one of the things that helps us do is do what we call the conceptual site model of how foam forms. So any new information will make that model better and help us predict things. One of the things that, a question you've asked, you've always wondered about the enrichment factor. So that will be something that I would like to look at in their studies also and see how theirs compares to ours. Maybe they have found a better way of sampling other than the pool skimmer too. So that'll be great. So yeah, I look forward to that. And I'm hoping that our study will help Dr. Field and others get ideas for looking for grant money from CERTUP or EPA or other agencies to continue doing more research on this issue.
Well, thank you, Mike, but in Oscoda at Worthsmith, we're really under the gun right now because of the phase that we're now in, and we've got to get actual data to get the Air Force to acknowledge the findings that you have, and then the findings that are coming out of, hopefully coming out of, and not squashed or hidden by the Jennifer Fields. So I'd like to challenge Eagle to look for some money, because the same contractor, yours and Jennifer Fields, part of her study, is the same contractor. So I think there's some efficiencies if you can find the managers to free up some money and have a conversation with them right now.
Well, you're talking to one of the managers, Steve, and the other manager to talk to will be Mike Neller also.
Got it. Message received. All right, folks. Hey, thanks very much, Mike, Jury, and everybody else for the good dialogue there. Appreciate that. So it's now 7:30. It's typically close to the end of our call. We've got a few more agenda items. I'd like to at least engage our two subcommittee chairs to give everybody an update. And so let's start out with Ken Harvey.
Yes, I'll be brief. We had our meeting tonight. And we had an outreach we talked about an outreach to Pelston Village, see what they could do about getting municipal water. AJ gave a short overview of the EPA PFAS report that he sent to all of us. Stephanie White gave us a document that we looked at for PFAS outreach materials for DHHS, and we'll be working on that again at our next meeting. And then we just had another item that we're looking for more members. So we're putting a plea out. If anybody wants to join us, we'll be glad to have them. And then tomorrow we've got a separate meeting set up with Abby Hendershot, and we're going to be talking about groundwater work group that she has and see what we can do to put some of our synergy together and work together. So that's our report for tonight. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Ken. Any questions for Ken? All right, let's move on to AJ and the Web Review Subcommittee.
Thanks, Steve. I'll keep it real tight because I know we're looking to move on. But basically, we had some really good discussions, lengthy discussions, on the fact that as we see more and more sites being added to the PFAS investigations list at MPART, how do we maintain these, keep them usable, prioritize them? And we discussed a 3-tier kind of priority system, and with updates kind of focused on the importance of the tier. The highest level tier would be sites where there is human exposure, in other words, drinking water that has been impacted. Second priority is sites with perhaps limited human exposure, perhaps surface water, still very important, but a little bit less important than the folks that are drinking it. And the third priority would be sites where, for example, a landfill where everything is contained so far to the landfill and that there's monitoring wells that are making sure that's not going off site. So, that's just conceptual at this point, but anxious to hear what other people might have or think about coming up with kind of a tiered approach. But I think no matter what the tier, one of the things we decided was that even for sites that have no current impact, that doesn't mean there isn't going to be a future impact. Perhaps dermal, perhaps inhalation, some things we just don't know about. I think it's important that all sites that are identified as PFAS sites in Michigan have information accessible on the MPART website. So, I think that, we briefly discussed maybe not having summary pages for some of these low risk sites, but I think that was discounted relatively early on. And I think we want to have a database that includes all our site. Finally, we had talked about kind of a top summary, some 1 or 2 sentence blurbs that kind of quickly identify what the site is about and that are the same across all investigation pages that appear there. So you got some uniformity, and maybe you can sort by these, but one would be the type of site. Is it an airport? Is it a manufacturing facility? Is it a landfill? The others are PFAS, the PFAS contaminants that have been detected, concentrations and ranges. The third would be, drinking water wells impacted, the number of wells impacted above, current drinking water standards, even though they might be private wells. I think we need to still flag those using the MCLs. And then number 4 would be current actions being taken. And number 5 would be community outreach activities ongoing or planned, so that people can see what the next steps are and how to participate in those. And again, very interested in hearing what people might think about that. But I think it's important that we just get, a short summary section that's uniform across all these different investigation pages, many of them written by different people at different times with different level of details, but we could still have this common information at the top. Anyhow, thanks so much. And if anyone else has any questions.
Yeah, thanks, AJ. Any questions for AJ? And like AJ and Ken mentioned, they're going to be meeting with the groundwater work group lead, Abby Hendershot, tomorrow to talk this through a little bit more in preparation for the February meeting. So, all right, so let's move on to the community round robin. I don't know if that's a round robin, but it's round. And so I want to give you all an opportunity to chime in with anything that you'd like to. This used to be more towards the end, at the end. Any lessons learned, noteworthy news, outreach events, and I'll just chime in on behalf of Pam McQueer, who doesn't have audio, but she's on the call, and she's going to be participating along with myself and Marcus Wasilewicz at the end of the month with the International Journalism and Natural Resources Group, doing a PFAS panel for Michigan. And I think Sandy, maybe you and maybe a couple others have talked with this group in the past. So that's good news there. Get to the journalists before they have questions to let them know who to reach out to and what's going on in Michigan. So anybody else have anything they want to offer up?
Yes, Steve. Gail Dugan.
Yes, go ahead, Gail.
I'd like to pass on to the group that we did take care of one PFAS problem here in Allegan County in Otsego Township. We got the Andrews Mobile Home Park attached, hooked up to municipal water supply, and we have taken care of that PFAS problem that they had there that was affecting 38 homes and 90 people. So this is great news for those residents of the park in Otsego Township, and we keep working on identifying these and getting solutions for them. So thank you for the work on Eagle's part in helping us get that done.
Absolutely. Thanks for that update. And Aaron, go ahead. I thought Aaron had his hand up, but no. Okay.
He did. I accidentally put it down because I thought he was going to speak.
Oh, okay. Go ahead, Aaron. I can't hear Aaron. Can anybody else hear Aaron? All right. Aaron, when you get your audio back, we'll come back to you. Just raise your hand again. And anybody else with any updates? All right. Well, then let's move on. And just preview, or actually, let's go MPART agency updates if there are any from any of the MPART agencies. If you have something, please raise your hand and we'll get to you. Yes, Marcus, DHHS.
Sure thing. If I can figure out how to get back to what I was going to say. It's always easier until I have to raise my hand. Just a health study. There's a question on the human health studies. MDHHS has launched the MyPES study. That's the Michigan PFAS Exposure and Health Study. Just a reminder, for this study, we have 2 study office sites. One of them is in the city of Parchment Cooper Township, that's Kalamazoo County. The other one is in the Belmont Rockford area, and that's in Kent County. At these study sites, participants will be giving a blood sample that will be measured for PFAS and other health biomarkers. They're also going to be taking a detailed survey to give information about the participants. And then we will also be sampling the water at their residence so we can see what they're, I guess, currently ingesting. The blood sampling at the clinics began in the latter part of December, so that's been running now for just shy of a month. They're taking participants 6 days a week, mornings only. We're really spacing them out for COVID reasons to make sure we don't have overlapping participants there. And the water sampling just started today, so we should be out in the field sampling some of the participants' water. We have a little over 200, I think it's about 250 participants so far signed up. We've sent out over 2,000 direct mailers to those that are eligible for the study. And we hope to send out another couple thousand mailers. We hope to have about 4,000 or so eligible participants for the study. I can and will post the link to our website in the chat. So if anybody wants to look at eligibility requirements or has other questions, I'm not necessarily the person to answer the questions in specifics, but the contact information will be on our website. So I'll post that into the link. I guess I can answer any other questions if there are any.
All right, thanks, Marcus. Any questions for Marcus? All right, much appreciated, Marcus. Any other MPART agencies with any updates? Okay, let's move on then. Next slide is the preview for the next meeting. And one thing that's not on here is Sandy's going to be doing some EPA training this month, I think, and brief the group at the February meeting. And what's that training about again, Sandy? My notes weren't good.
Oh, I was actually doing training with scientists and on-site coordinators for EPA on how to communicate risk effectively to community people. So I don't know that training applies to this group as much as others, but maybe I can at least get some feedback from people on what they think would be important for EPA or other scientists to know when they communicate with community leaders. So I'll figure something out.
Okay, no, that's good. And do you want us to give you 10 minutes on the next agenda?
Sure.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Didn't mean to throw you under the bus there, but I knew you were going to be doing something this month and might want to talk about it. So thank you. And the next two things on here is culmination really of all the work we've been talking about with sites, how we declare sites and put the information out on the web. That information should be coming to you for your all input on February 9th. And this comes off of Dave Wynn's suggestion that we, kind of look for some input or information from others outside of Michigan and what they're experiencing. And so Lorene Allen, I know Sandy and Tony, several of you know her. Kelly and I talked with her a few weeks ago, and she's anxious to, talk with you all, kind of share her experiences and what might be a little more unique with hers out in New Hampshire versus what we have here. So we're looking forward to that, and she may actually reach out to some of you all to see what might be most helpful for this group. So looking forward to that. And are there other things that we need to make sure are on the agenda except for more time? All right. Well, everybody, again, thanks for bearing with us. We went a little bit over. I see a hand is up, though. Tony, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to bring up when Aaron was muted or whatever, he did put a question in the box that perhaps you could address, Steve, if you can see it.
All right, let me see if I can get to it. Is there a future meeting planned to update us regarding progress of PFAS issues and enforcement with the DOD contaminated sites? Are you looking really for something just kind of more broadly with what's going on with us and DOD and what they are and aren't complying with when it comes to state standards, things like that? Because I think we could possibly come in with a bit of a presentation on that, some of the struggles that we're having and progress or lack thereof statewide, which, as you all know, is probably something experienced across the country, unfortunately. But do you think, is that what you're looking for?
Unfortunately, I can't speak for Aaron, but it sounds like a good idea.
Yeah, we can get that on the agenda. As many of you know, we unfortunately didn't get in the National Defense Authorization Act Congresswoman Slotkin's provision, which would have pretty much required DOD to comply with state standards and not even go through the ARAR process. But we're hoping to be supportive of efforts again to make something happen, and maybe we've got a better shot at it, coming into the new year. So fingers crossed on that. But yeah, let me put on the agenda just kind of a general overall DOD challenges conversation. Thanks for that. All right. Well, everybody, thanks again for bearing with us as we went a little bit over. Appreciate that, and look forward to chatting with you no later than a month from now. So everybody, have a good night, what's left of it. Be safe, and we'll talk with you soon.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
Bye.